legendary power of Venti's abilities are feared by many enemies, and the only question remains, how will you build him? Even though playing Venti is pretty straightforward, there are a couple of things you need to keep in mind if you want to squeeze out the most damage out of him and also improve your team's performance. And probably the one question on everyone's mind would be how to use his elemental skill effectively, and the best way to do this would be to only rely on the hold version of the skill if you're up against very specific scenarios, which includes avoiding the detonating bomb from the Oceanid boss, or using it against enemies with certain auras like Geo, where massive ground attacks are sent against you and it becomes easier to avoid them if you're gliding above. And that's the thing, while the hold version of the skill does hit for significantly more damage, it also comes with the drawback of a longer cooldown, and part of the reason why Venti is so powerful would be his fast energy recharge and the amount of particles he creates from simply pressing the skill, not to mention you're also able to hit more precisely and safely. Now when you're pressing the elemental skill, you can do something that's called animation cancel, and the best way to actually take advantage of this trick would be to immediately follow up with a burst right after pressing the elemental skill, and this becomes very efficient if you have full energy and do this at the right order, because the energy from skills come in the form of particles which still need to travel and get absorbed by the character. So while those tiny particles are busy traveling, the combo you execute will end up with partially restored energy bar and fully unleashed burst. Finally, for the actual talent that makes Venti the most amazing character to use for crowd control would be his burst, and the only thing that matters is how you launch it, because the first elemental status the burst comes into contact with will result into an elemental absorption. And a lot of the times, especially in domains, before the fight begins, you can use other characters that produce elemental status on the battlefield and then start the fight immediately with a burst, which can save you from nasty enemy attacks like those fire blades Fatui agents cast on themselves. All in all, there's a couple of tricks and useful techniques you can use when relying on Venti's elemental skill, but for the most part, getting the hang of his burst and elemental absorption is key to perfecting his crowd control and utility. But controlling your enemies isn't fun if they're not getting shredded to pieces, and for this, we need to take a look at the Tone Deaf Bard's equipment. Unlike most other characters in the game, Venti isn't the most complex when it comes to his weapons and artifacts, since he pretty much excels in one role of a supportive damage dealer that comes with the major perk of a crowd controller. And probably the best 4-star bow you can get for him would be the Stringless, just because of how ridiculously good the passive is. But one thing to keep in mind would be the refinement levels, and also making sure you're not lacking on your other stats, so things like critical rate or damage are ever so important, which means relying on either the Battle Pass bow or Blacklift weapon from the Star Glitter shop could help you out at obtaining the preferred stats, which usually lies somewhere around 50 to 70% critical rate and then double the amount of critical damage of what critical rate you have. Still, if you can refine your Stringless to the 2nd level, it already outperforms most weapons. Just keep in mind the major stats mentioned before. But when it comes to 5-star weapons, Skyward Harp, even at the first refinement level, easily is the best bow for Venti, even if you own a fully refined Stringless. On the other hand, Ammo's bow or Elegy for the End are great, but only if you don't have any other good 4-star options. Finally, for the free-to-play players, or those unlucky with gacha, you can go for the Favonius Warbow, which gets awarded to you after reaching Adventure Rank 18, and it will generate more than enough energy not just for himself, but also for the team, thanks to its passive. Also, as of making this video, the Alley Hunter is not yet available for evaluation, but if you want to stay informed once it becomes obtainable, make sure to follow us on Twitter, link in the description. Moving over to artifacts, probably the easiest combination to obtain would be the 2-set bonuses of Iridescent and Noblesse Oblige, which is more or less focused on delivering as much damage as possible by taking advantage of Venti's powerful talents. These sets basically let you double down on the support damage dealer role. Now, the next recommended artifacts would be the full set bonus of Iridescent, but the reason why it gets brought up as a second option would be the fact that there's actually a lot of enemies who have internal elemental statuses ranging from slimes to abyss mages to even Fatui skirmishers, not to mention some of the new Dragonspine monsters also have cryo status on them. And all of this means that the burst will absorb and spread through swirls by using one of those internal statuses, and this might be an undesirable result for some players. This doesn't mean it will always happen, and you can prevent this by landing your own elemental attacks and then using the burst at close proximity, so it has more likelihood to absorb it as the first status on contact. Of course, you can control the precision of this 4-set bonus by instead using his elemental skill to lower the resistance, which can be really good when up against stronger enemies. Still, this is one of the best artifact sets for him, and it really depends on your own playstyle and tactical planning to see which of the set combinations you will perform more. But for those who are undecided or looking for an alternative solution, you can easily go with the full Noblesse Oblige if you haven't got anyone else using it in the team, since Venti can pretty much spam the burst every time it's off cooldown. And for those who are still on their way from early to mid game, you can go for the full set bonuses of either Exiles, Scholars, Instructors, or even Gamblers. Just remember, when it comes to priority, you should care about the artifact stats first, and then only consider bonuses as the second thing that matters. Speaking of priority, the stats you want to focus on if you're an endgame player would be critical rate or damage, followed by attack, and then lastly, energy recharge or elemental mastery. And with this logic for main stats, you would want to have attack percentage on Sands, animo damage bonus on Goblet, and critical rate or damage on Circlet. Finally, when spending resources on his talents, prioritize his burst first, then elemental skill next. And there's really no need to level up his normal attacks, since it doesn't have enough impactful damage. So in essence, Venti is a pretty straightforward character, and it's important to mention that he's absolutely amazing even without proper equipment, and this is more or less just optimizing his damage output by following the traditional route of endgame for critical rate and damage. Any team is basically going to be blessed to have Venti as their support, and while the majority of this reason is the insane crowd control from his burst, it's also important to touch upon the fact he is from Animo Element, so taking advantage of the full Viridescent artifact set is going to be great if you manage to trigger the bonus in your favor. But one thing to keep in mind about his burst would be that it actually lifts the enemies mid-air, and some characters will be unable to damage them with their skills and even bursts. So before you commit to a team, make sure to experiment and see if everyone plays well together. And aside from this, the Animo Archon is pretty much a plug-and-play character, and there's rarely a situation he won't work extremely well. Ever since he first showed up as the first featured 5-star character in Genshin Impact, the legends surrounding this cheerful fellow have spread like wildfire about his insane power level. Overall, you're looking at the ultimate crowd control character that takes care of any small and even mid-sized enemy by neatly pushing them into a deadly vortex and then allowing you to take advantage of the positioning by unleashing your most powerful team attacks. If that's not enough, he comes packing with a ton of damage thanks to the way his elemental skill damage scales, not to mention his ascension stat is energy recharge that gets paired together with one of the passive talents, which results into constant burst attacks that even get easier to accomplish thanks to how many particles he gets from the elemental skill due to its low cooldown. But if we're looking for some drawbacks, then it would definitely be his first constellation that acts as a fluff before you can unlock more serious ones. Also, some of the attacks from your teammates won't connect with the enemies who are pulled in by the vortex, but there's only few cases when this can happen. Still, these are minor picks at best, and the ridiculous amount of power you can get from him, even without any weapons or artifacts equipped, is astounding, so getting each new piece of gear or upgrade feels significant. Either way, it's going to be interesting to see how long it will take before the next new character dethrones him as the best crowd controller in the game. Even if the common joke among the community is to simply smash the burst button without any afterthought, there's still a lot of fun to be found by making your Venti as strong as possible, and this is especially true for those who are free to play and are working with very limited resources. Speaking of which, producing these kinds of videos also takes a lot of effort, so if there's any mistakes included, make sure to check the pinned comment. Also, we would be thankful if you could support the channel and subscribe by hitting the bell notification on, and then making sure to gently press the like button. For more Genshin news and guides, follow us on Twitter, link in the description. Thank you for watching us, and see you in the next video.